There's been a lot of stink about how Microsoft is force-feeding its users on both Windows 10 and Windows 11, but especially in regards to Windows 11 with its AI Copilot garbage. Damned be what the users want, as long as Microsoft can show off how many Windows users are, quote, adopting Copilot to their shareholders, all will be well, and those quarterly earnings can be all green and serene. Of course, for the user, this isn't the best arrangement. For one, most ordinary people just want to use their computer as a computer without all of these forced and bloated AI feature updates. So, with this in mind, is the recent news around Windows 7 making a remarkable resurgence all that it makes out to be? Are people simply so sick and tired of Windows 11 bloatware, forced Microsoft account creation and system-critical telemetry that these factors combined have made these disgruntled users not only revert to their previous operating system of Windows 10, but look even further back, perhaps all the way back to the good old days of Windows 7? Well, like with most things, it's a little bit of a yes, followed by a big dose of not really, but maybe a little. But just what the hell do I actually mean by that? Let me explain myself. For quite a long time after the release of Windows 11, the majority of Windows users remained on Windows 10, largely due to consumers simply not wanting to update their systems, either for stability reasons or just plain refusal to upgrade. I mean, why fix something that isn't broken? It's easy to forget just how many people are not only ignorant, I guess, of how their system works on a basic level, but how many people just don't want to know about it and would rather keep trundling along with the same old system until it breaks or someone else does the upgrade for them, and who can blame them? But eventually, Microsoft began to tighten the vice, so to speak, on those users still on Windows 10, and with Windows 10 Home and Pro editions reaching end of life in October 2025, they could now begin to really prize out those who were clinging on to Windows 10 with the scary message that their system is no longer protected by up-to-date security patches, and that they are vulnerable. But what about those who can't update? Maybe their system lacks TPM 2.0, or God forbid, maybe the BIOS looks a little too spooky to delve into and enable secure boot after you caught your grandson playing with some bootable USB mint or something or other. Very treacherous stuff. After all, having TPM 2.0 and Secure Boot enabled are now requirements for a Windows 11 upgrade or install, officially. Well, as you've probably inferred from my yapping so far, some of these users were inevitably going to delve into the kitchen drawer and retrieve that Windows 7 install disk to go back to happier days. But it's not nearly as widespread or popular as it has been reported to be. First of all, we have to look at where these articles or posts online get their info from. One of the primary sources of information reporting on this huge uptick on Windows 7 users is StatCounter.com, a very popular site for seeing the popularity of certain software and operating systems. Even though I've used it a few times in the past with videos, it can be occasionally incorrect, strictly speaking. However, StatCount continually corrects its stats whenever erroneous data is brought to light. This is because the site does not collect OS usage directly by way of, say, monitoring operating system installations. This would be impossible unless they were able to access some in-house Microsoft data collection software about their operating systems, both new and old. Obviously, this wouldn't be open to any old stat collecting company. According to Windows Latest, and I quote, "To use StatCounter, websites install its tracking code. Right now, StatCounter numbers, including Windows 7 market share, are calculated by aggregating billions of page views recorded each month from its tracking code installed on over 1.5 million websites." In other words, for websites to utilize the features of StatCounter, which are said to be similar in terms of features and purpose to Google Analytics, just with a few extra features and more detailed information, they must install some software that is then able to view the user agent of the website visitor's browser, extract the OS of that specific user agent, as well as a bunch of other information like which browser they're using, the version, screen resolution, etc., and send that info to StatCounter, who can then use it to aggregate the percentage of internet users as a whole that are on a specific OS, and in this case, Windows 7, from that aggregated pool of information. And in September 2025, the percentage of Windows users on Windows 7 was estimated using the previously described estimation process at just over 9%. of all Windows users, up from less than a single percentage from July of the same year. That's 2 months. This is where all of the headlines stating that Windows 7 is making such a huge comeback come from. But this was made in error. The erroneous calculation stating that Windows 7 users comprise nearly 10% of all Windows users could have originated from a few things. Again, referring to the Windows latest website, the article mentions a few different ways this could have happened, which all makes sense to me at least, with the most likely culprits, I think, being web crawlers somehow spoofing their user agent to display either a bogus Windows version or just an older Windows version, with the websites collecting the user agent, so the websites that have the stat tracker software installed that the users are visiting, try to collect this information and just defaulted to Windows 7 as like a fallback user OS version or something. Like, the user agent has pure drivel as an OS version, so the website just assumes they're on Windows 7. Again, this is just hypothetical, but to move the percentage of Windows users that was less than a single percent 2 months before it being suddenly 10% of all users on Windows just 2 months later is pretty wacky. If that was real, that would require some pretty hefty operating system migrations from a lot of users. That, or, stat counter just added a 0 after the 1%, you never know. But to keep this video short, because ultimately there's not too much to talk about with this, I just thought it was interesting to talk about. Yes, Windows 7 probably made a slight resurgence, but in the same way that some old guy living in a bothy in the Scottish Caledonian forest might have reinstalled Windows XP because Windows 11 requires the internet to install, and he hasn't gotten around to getting a subscription to Starlink just yet, and for whatever reason he's just tired of Windows 10. Look, it's probable that some people have gone back to Windows 7, but it's nowhere near 10% of all Windows users. That is insane. Going from Windows 10 or Windows 11 back to Windows 7 is kind of insane anyway, just because of how many features I think I take for granted, like drivers on Windows 10. So much easier than Windows 7. But anyway, that's pretty much it. Thank you very much for watching. Subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in my next video.